Valkyries of the Viking Age. Women warriors of Norse myth. The Viking Age, a time of fierce warriors, powerful kings, and epic sagas. But amidst the bloodshed and glory of battle, there's a story that's often overlooked. The women who fought, led, and shaped Norse mythology. From the legendary Valkyries who rode into battle to choose the worthy fallen, to Shieldmaidens who stood side by side with men, the women of the Viking Age were far more than just passive figures. Today, we'll dive into the fascinating role of women in Viking society and mythology, exploring their power as warriors, seers, and influential leaders. In the world of Norse mythology, Valkyries were divine female figures, often depicted as fearsome warriors who rode swift horses and carried the spirits of the slain to Valhalla, the great hall of the gods. These women were not just observers, they were warriors in their own right, choosing who would live and who would die on the battlefield. The word Valkyrie itself comes from Old Norse, meaning chooser of the slain. They served Odin, the All-Father, in his quest to gather the greatest warriors for Ragnarok, the final battle between gods and giants. But these women weren't just there to escort the dead. They were deeply entwined in the Viking warrior culture, often described as skilled fighters with a strength to match any man. In the poetic Edda, an ancient collection of Norse poems, Valkyries are depicted as both fierce and mysterious. They were often portrayed as beautiful, with magical powers and a deep connection to fate. But in their roles, they were also seen as protectors of warriors, offering both glory and death. Real-life Shieldmaidens. While Valkyries belonged to the realm of myth, the concept of women warriors wasn't confined to legend. The Vikings were known for their brutal raids, but among these fierce warriors were real women who took up arms and fought beside their male counterparts. Shieldmaidens, as they were known, were women who trained in combat and fought in battles. Though their stories were often romanticized, there are accounts of Shieldmaidens from the Viking sagas and historical texts. Women like Lagertha, who is said to have been a warrior Shieldmaiden and a queen, inspire much of what we think of when imagining Viking women in battle. The sagas, though written centuries after the events they describe, tell stories of Shieldmaidens leading armies, engaging in duels, and defending their homelands. In one of the most famous tales, Lagertha defends her homeland by leading a battalion of women warriors who strike terror into the hearts of the enemy. While evidence of women warriors in the Viking Age is often debated by historians, archaeological discoveries have suggested that Viking women may have been more involved in combat than we thought. The famous female warrior grave, discovered in Birka, Sweden, contained a woman's remains buried with weapons like a sword, shield, and armor, suggesting that women could have fought on the front lines. Seers and priestesses. But the role of Viking women wasn't limited to the battlefield. They were also central to the spiritual and mystical realms of Norse culture. In Viking society, women had strong connections to the spiritual world. Many women were seers or vulvas, practitioners of magic who could communicate with the gods, predict the future, and perform rituals to influence the outcome of battles. These women were highly respected and held powerful roles within their communities. The vulvas were often sought after for their wisdom, acting as advisors to kings and warriors. Through rituals and sacrifices, they connected with the gods, seeking guidance for everything from crop yields to military success. One of the most well-known depictions of a vulva comes from the poetic Edda, where the prophetess foretells the fate of the gods and the coming of Ragnarok. The vulvas were not just passive figures, they were leaders in their own right, using their power to shape Viking society. Women in Viking society had a deep spiritual connection to the world around them, and their wisdom and magic were seen as essential to the well-being of their people. Viking women in society. Beyond their roles as warriors and seers, Viking women played vital roles in the everyday life of Norse society. They managed households, cared for children, and were often the backbone of Viking family structures. Women had rights in Viking society that were unique for their time. They could inherit property, initiate divorce, and even participate in trade. This allowed them to maintain significant influence, particularly in the absence of their husbands during long voyages or battles. The Viking women who stayed behind were often the ones who kept their communities intact, managing farms and businesses, maintaining social order, and preserving traditions. While the men went off to raid and explore, the women ensured the survival of their families, making them essential to the Viking way of life. The Viking world, though often portrayed as a warrior society, was also one in which women had a considerable degree of autonomy and respect. They were not just seen as caretakers, but as equals who could lead, fight, and influence their society in significant ways. The legacy of Viking women, from Valkyries to Shieldmaidens, continues to captivate our imaginations. These women were not just participants in the great stories of Viking history. They were the creators of those stories. Their courage, strength, and wisdom left an indelible mark on Norse mythology and Viking culture. As we look back at the Viking Age, it's clear that the role of women was far from passive. They were warriors, leaders, and spiritual guides, each playing a crucial part in the shaping of Viking society. The Valkyries, the Shieldmaidens, and the Volvas remind us that the Viking Age wasn't just a time for men to claim glory, but for women to claim their own. So, the next time you hear the tales of Viking warriors, remember that women were at the heart of those stories. Warriors in their own right, destined to shape the future of their world and beyond. What do you think about the role of women in Viking society? Were the Valkyries and Shieldmaidens a product of myth, or is there more truth to their stories than we realize? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the fierce women of the Viking Age, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing stories from history. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.